The alien princess blinked in surprise. "You're choosing me as your partner, human?" The great hall of Concordia Prime stretched out like an ocean of light and color, filled with representatives from 100 different worlds who had gathered for the most important diplomatic ceremony of the decade. Ambassador Kang Ji-won stood near the entrance and watched the chaos of alien bodies moving through the massive space. His human eyes trying to make sense of creatures that walked on 6 legs, floated through the air, or shimmered with colors that had no names in any Earth language. He was the youngest ambassador Earth had ever sent to the Galactic Unity Summit, and many back home had questioned the decision to give such an important role to someone who was only 32 years old. But Ji-won had earned his position through years of careful study and genuine dedication to the cause of peace between worlds. "The selection ceremony will begin shortly," announced a booming voice that echoed through the hall, translated instantly into every language known to the galactic community. All representatives must prepare to choose their diplomatic partners for the cultural exchange program. Ji-won understood what this meant, and he had studied the process carefully before arriving at the station. Every species would select a partner from another world, and for 1 full year, those partners would work together, learn from each other, and build bridges between their civilizations. But everyone knew that the real purpose was political strategy, and the powerful species always chose other powerful species, creating alliances that left the weaker worlds even more isolated than before. He watched as the Kovathi delegate, a massive creature covered in golden scales, immediately approached the Hegemony Collective's representative, and the two began talking about trade agreements before the ceremony had even officially started. The Venn synthesis, beings of pure energy contained in crystalline shells, gathered around the wealthy merchant guilds of the Outer Rim, already calculating the economic benefits of their inevitable partnership. Ji-won let his gaze wander across the hall, and he noticed something that made his heart feel heavy in his chest. In a far corner of the great hall, sitting alone on a bench designed for creatures twice her size, was a single figure that no one approached. No one acknowledged, and no one seemed to even see. She was Mithari, and Ji-won recognized her species from his studies. The Mithari had once been among the greatest civilizations in the galaxy, their ships traveling to the farthest stars, their art and music celebrated across 1,000 worlds. But then the Silence Plague had come, and within a single generation, billions had died, leaving only a handful of survivors on a single damaged colony world. Now they were considered worthless by galactic standards, a dying species with nothing to offer. And everyone at the summit pretended they did not exist. Ji-won walked toward her, and as he got closer, he could see her more clearly. She had silver blue scales that covered her humanoid form, and delicate fin-like structures extended from her head where a human would have hair. And her eyes were large and dark, reflecting the lights of the hall like pools of starlight. But those beautiful eyes held a sadness so deep that Ji-won could feel it from 10 meters away. She was Princess Vela Sornthi, the last heir to the Mithari throne, and she had come to the summit knowing that no one would choose her, that she would sit alone through the entire ceremony and return home with nothing but more reasons to feel ashamed of what her people had become. Ji-won stopped in front of her, and she looked up with surprise written across her alien features. "Princess Vela Sornthi of the Mithari sovereignty," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I am Ambassador Kang Ji-won of Earth, and I would be honored if you would consent to be my partner in the cultural exchange program." Her scales flashed with sudden bioluminescence, colors rippling across her skin and patterns that Ji-won did not fully understand, but could recognize as shock. "I am sorry," she said, a voice soft and musical despite her confusion. "But I think you have made a mistake, human. Perhaps you meant to approach someone else?" "There is no mistake," Ji-won replied. and he held out his hand in the human gesture of greeting and trust. "I am choosing you, princess, if you will have me as your partner." The hall had grown quiet around them, and Ji-won could feel the eyes of 100 species turning toward this strange scene. This impossible moment where a human was offering his hand to the most politically worthless being in the entire galaxy. Vela's dark eyes searched his face, looking for the trick, the hidden agenda, the cruel joke that must surely be waiting behind his kind expression. But she found nothing except sincerity and warmth. "You are choosing me?" she whispered, and her voice carried through the silent hall. "You are choosing me as your partner, human?" "Yes," Ji-won said simply, and his smile was gentle but firm. "I am." She stared at him for a long moment, and then slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and placed her hand in his. Her scales were cool and smooth against his skin, and where they touched, her bioluminescence pulsed with soft blue light. The watching crowd erupted into whispers and murmurs, and Ji-won heard the Korvati delegate laugh with contempt. "The human has wasted Earth's opportunity," someone said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "They chose a dying species over real power. What fools these Earthlings are." Ji-won heard the words, and he felt Vela flinch beside him, her hand trying to pull away from his grip, but he held on gently and turned to face the crowd with the same calm expression he had worn since entering the hall. He did not argue with them or defend his choice with words. He simply smiled, and in that smile was a quiet confidence that confused everyone who saw it. Because the human did not look like someone who had made a mistake at all. He looked like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Vela watched him with wonder growing in her ancient eyes, and for the first time in many years, she felt something that she had almost forgotten was possible. She felt hope. The alien princess blinked in surprise. "You're choosing me as your partner, human?" The human diplomatic vessel, HSV, Horizon cut through the darkness of space like a silver fish swimming through an endless ocean. And inside its comfortable quarters, Princess Vela sat by a window and watched the stars go by. 3 days had passed since the selection ceremony, and she still could not understand what had happened. She had spent those days waiting for the other shoe to drop, as the humans like to say, waiting for Ambassador Ji-won to reveal his true reasons for choosing her, waiting for the moment when everything would make sense, and she would discover that she had been fooled once again. But that moment never came. Ji-won treated her with consistent kindness and genuine respect, and he never asked for anything in return. And he never made her feel like she owed him a debt that could never be repaid. It was confusing and frightening and wonderful all at the same time. A soft knock came at her door, and she called out permission to enter. And Ji-won stepped inside with a tray of food in his hands. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray down on a small table. The ship's cook tried to prepare something that would be safe for Mithari to eat. "But please tell me if anything is wrong, and we will fix it immediately." Viola looked at the food, simple dishes, arranged with care. Nothing fancy or expensive, but prepared with obvious thought for her comfort. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, and the question came out before she could stop it, sharp and suspicious despite her best efforts to hide her feelings. Ji-won sat down across from her and tilted his head slightly. A gesture she had learned meant curiosity in human body language. "Doing what, exactly?" "All of this," Vela said, and her scales flickered with frustrated colors. "Being kind to me, choosing me as your partner, treating me like I matter. No one does these things without a reason. Ambassador, so please tell me what you want from me." Ji-won was quiet for a moment, and then he leaned back in his chair and began to speak. "Do you know what the other species called Earth when they first discovered us?" Vela shook her head. "They called us the Death World Primitives," Ji-won said. And there was no bitterness in his voice, only a kind of gentle amusement. "Our planet was considered too dangerous for intelligent life. Too much radiation. Too many predators. too many natural disasters. And yet somehow we survived there and even thrived. He smiled at her confused expression and continued, when we finally reached the stars, the galactic community looked at us and saw nothing of value. Just a young species from a harsh world who would probably destroy themselves within a few centuries. And they dismissed us the same way they dismissed the Mathari now. Vela felt something twist in her chest at his words. But you proved them wrong, she said softly. We did, Jiwan agreed. And we proved them wrong not by becoming powerful or wealthy or feared, but by showing them something they had forgotten was possible. We showed them that worth is not measured by what you have, but by who you choose to become. He leaned forward, and his dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her bioluminescence pulse without her permission. The Mathari were once great, and the galaxy has decided that you will never be great again. But humans do not believe that about anyone, Princess. Because we have learned through our own hard history that today's weakness can become tomorrow's strength. Vela wanted to believe him so badly that it hurt. The decades of disappointment and betrayal had built walls around her heart. And she could not simply let them fall because one human spoke kind words to her. The ship shuddered slightly, and a voice came over the communication system announcing that they had arrived at a supply station and would be docking for a few hours. Come with me, Jiwan said, standing up and offering his hand. You should see more of the galaxy than the inside of this ship. They walked together through the station, and Vela tried to ignore the stares and whispers that followed them everywhere. A group of Kovathi merchants blocked their path, and the largest one stepped forward with contempt dripping from every word he spoke. Look at this. Brother is a human playing nursemaid to the last Mathari princess. How pathetic it must be to have no one else willing to touch you, Scaleskin. Vela felt the familiar shame burning through her body, and she tried to step back, tried to make herself smaller, tried to disappear the way she had learned to do over so many years. But Jiwan did not move. He stepped forward instead, and his voice was cold enough to freeze the air between them. You will apologize to Princess Vela immediately, or I will formally lodge a diplomatic protest with the Galactic Council and request an investigation into Kovathi trading practices in this sector. The Kovathi merchant laughed nervously, suddenly unsure. It was just a joke, human. Surely you cannot be serious. I am completely serious, Jiwan said, and his calm tone was somehow more frightening than any shout could have been. The princess is my diplomatic partner, and an insult to her is an insult to Earth itself. Now apologize, or face the consequences. The merchant looked around at his companions, found no support, and finally mumbled an apology before hurrying away with his friends. Vela stood frozen in place, her scales rippling with colors she could not control, her heart beating faster than it had in years. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever stood between her and cruelty and refused to move. Why? She whispered, and her voice was barely audible. Jiwan turned to her with that same gentle smile that confused her so much. Because you matter, Viola, and it is time someone reminded you of that. She stared at him, and something cracked deep inside her chest. It was the first crack in the wall around her heart. And she knew that this human, this strange and wonderful creature from a death world, was going to change everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. The alien princess blinked in surprise. You're choosing me as your partner, human? Earth was nothing like Vela had expected. She had studied the human homeworld before arriving, reading reports that described it as a harsh and dangerous place filled with extreme weather, deadly predators, and violent geological activity. And she had prepared herself to endure a difficult, an unpleasant environment, but the reality was completely different. Yes, Earth was dangerous in many ways, but it was also beautiful beyond anything she had ever imagined. Blue sky stretched overhead like endless paintings. Green plants covered the land in thousands of different shades. And water fell from the clouds in gentle rain that made everything smell fresh and clean. Jiwan took her to see the great cities where millions of humans lived together in complex harmony. And he showed her the ancient places, where his ancestors had built temples and monuments that still stood after thousands of years. But the place that changed her forever was a small village in the Korean countryside, where Jiwan's grandmother lived in a simple house surrounded by gardens. My grandmother does not speak the common galactic language, Jiwan explained as they walked up the path to the house. But she insisted on meeting you when she heard about our partnership, so I hope you do not mind. Vela did not know what to expect, but nothing could have prepared her for the tiny old woman who came rushing out of the house with a smile as bright as any star. Grandmother Kang was small and wrinkled and moved slowly with age, but her eyes were sharp and kind, and she grabbed Vela's hands without any hesitation or fear. She spoke rapidly in Korean, and Jiwan translated with a gentle smile. She says you are too thin and need to eat more. And she wants to know if Mathari can eat rice and vegetables, because she has been cooking all morning. Vela found herself being pulled into the house before she could respond. And within minutes, she was seated at a low table covered with more food than she had seen in years. Grandmother Kang placed dish after dish in front of her, explaining each one through Jiwan's translation, asking questions about Mathakuri customs and nodding seriously at every answer. She treated Vela like a granddaughter coming home after a long journey. And something broke inside Vela's heart, not the wall that protected her, but something else, something deeper, and suddenly she was crying, her tears falling onto the beautiful food while her scales flashed with emotions she could not name. "I am sorry," she said through her tears. "I do not know why I am acting like this. Please forgive me." Grandmother Kang did not need a translation to understand what was happening. She simply moved around the table and wrapped her arms around Vela, holding her tight the way she might hold a frightened child, making soft sounds of comfort that needed no words to be understood. Jiwan watched quietly, and when Vela finally stopped crying, he explained something that she would never forget. "Humans have a concept called found family," he said softly. "It means that the people we choose to love are just as important as the people we are born to. And my grandmother has decided that you are family now. Vela, she does not care about politics or power or what species you are." Vela looked at the old woman, who was now pressing more food toward her with insistent gestures. And she understood something that had escaped her for her entire life. Love did not need a reason. They stayed with Grandmother Kang for 3 days, and those days were the happiest Vela could remember since before the plague took her family. But the galaxy would not let them have peace for long. When they returned to the capital, Jiwan was immediately called into emergency meetings. And Vela saw the worried looks on the faces of the human diplomats. She was not invited to the meetings, but she found a quiet corner near the conference room where she could hear voices through the walls. "The Hegemony Collective is threatening trade sanctions if we continue this partnership," someone said urgently. "They control 40% of our supply routes. We cannot afford to anger them over one Mathari. Earth's reputation is on the line," another voice argued. "If we abandon our partner because of political pressure, no one will ever trust us again." "But is she worth the trouble?" a third voice asked, and those words cut through Vela like a blade made of ice. "The Mathari have nothing to offer us. This partnership was a mistake from the beginning." Vela did not wait to hear more. She fled to her quarters and began packing her few belongings, her hands shaking with grief and determination. She would leave before she could cause any more harm to the people who had been so kind to her. The door opened behind her, and she did not need to turn around to know who was standing there. "Where do you think you are going?" Jiwan asked, and his voice was calm but firm. "I am leaving," Vela said, still facing away from him. I will not let Earth suffer because of me. The hegemony is too powerful. I am not worth a war. That is not your decision to make, Jiwan replied. Yes, it is. Vela spun around, her scales blazing with desperate light. I have spent my whole life being a burden to everyone around me. I will not do that to you and your people. Jiwan walked toward her and gently took the bag from her hands. You are not a burden. Vela, and you are not going anywhere. We made a choice. And humans do not abandon the people they have chosen to stand beside. She stared at him with tears threatening to fall again. But why? She whispered, why do you care so much about someone worthless like me? John set down the bag and looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because you are not worthless, he said. And before this year is over, I am going to prove that to the entire galaxy. The alien princess blinked in surprise. You're choosing me as your partner, human? The Galactic Council chamber was the largest structure Vela had ever seen. A massive dome that floated in orbit around a neutral star, filled with representatives from every major civilization in known space. She stood beside Jiwan at the center of the Great Hall, feeling impossibly small beneath the countless eyes that stared down at them from tiered balconies that rose toward the distant ceiling. This is madness, she whispered to him. The Hegemony Collective has 500 worlds under their control. What can one human do against that? Jiwan smiled, and in that smile was a confidence that she was beginning to recognize as something uniquely human. Watch and learn. Princess. The council speaker, a being of living crystal whose voice rang like bells, called the session to order. Ambassador Kang, G1 of Earth, has requested emergency time to address the council. This is highly irregular, but Earth has invoked the right of testimony, which cannot be denied. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, and Vela saw the hegemony representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. G1 stepped forward to the speaking platform and bowed respectfully to the assembled delegates. Honored representatives, I come before you today not to ask for favors or make demands, but to reveal a truth that the galaxy has been too comfortable to see. He pressed a control on his wrist device, and holographic images appeared in the air above him. They showed a planet beautiful and green, with cities that sparkled like jewels and oceans that shone with bioluminescent life. This is the Mathari homeworld as it existed before the Silence Plague. A civilization of artists and scholars, of musicians and dreamers, reduced in a single generation to a handful of survivors struggling to rebuild. The images changed to show the planet as it was now scarred and damaged, with vast mining operations tearing into the land. And this is what the Hegemony Collective has been doing while the galaxy looked away. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. These are lies, the Hegemony delegate shouted, rising from his seat. The human is spreading false propaganda too. I have documentation, G1 interrupted calmly. And new images appeared showing shipping records, communication logs, and financial transactions. For the past 30 years, the hegemony has been illegally mining the Mathari homeworld, stealing resources from a dying species because they assumed no one would care enough to investigate. Vela stared at the evidence with horror and rage burning through her body. She had known that her people were suffering, but she had never imagined that their suffering was being deliberately caused by one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. How did you obtain this evidence? The council speaker asked. Through my diplomatic partnership with Princess Vela, G1 replied. The old Mathari records still exist, buried in archives that no one has accessed in decades. When I helped Vela study her own people's history, we found traces of these crimes hidden in the data. He turned to face the hegemony delegation directly. You thought the Mathari were worthless, so you decided to take everything they had left. You did not expect anyone to notice, and you certainly did not expect a human to care enough to look. The hegemony delegate's face twisted with fury. This changes nothing. The Mathari are a dead civilization. Their resources would only go to waste without our intervention. Jiwan's expression became cold and hard in a way that Vela had never seen before. And there it is. Honored Council, the truth that hides beneath all the politics and power struggles of our great galactic community. He turned to address the full chamber. If we abandon those who cannot help us, if we allow the weak to be devoured simply because they cannot fight back, then we do not deserve the stars we have claimed. We become nothing more than predators wearing the masks of civilization. Silence fell across the chamber. Heavy and thoughtful, the council speaker turned to Vela. Princess Vela Soanti, you have been silent through these proceedings. Do you wish to speak? Vela felt fear grip her heart, but she also felt something else. Something stronger. She felt the courage that Jiwan and his grandmother and all the strange, wonderful humans had given her. She stepped forward to the speaking platform, her scales flickering with nervous light. For many years, I believed what the galaxy told me about my people, she said, and her voice grew stronger with each word. I believed we were worthless, that we deserved our fate, that no one would ever care about us again. She looked at Jiwan, standing beside her with pride shining in his eyes. But then I met a human who saw something different. He saw potential where others saw only failure. He saw worth where others saw only waste, and he chose to stand beside me when everyone else looked away. She turned back to the council. Humans are strange creatures from a harsh world, and they believe things that make no logical sense. They believe that every life has value, that the weak deserve protection. That hope is never truly lost, and I have learned that sometimes the most illogical beliefs are the ones most worth fighting for. The chamber remained silent for a long moment, and then slowly, one by one, delegates from neutral worlds began to signal their support for Earth's position. The hegemony's power was vast, but it could not stand against the moral clarity of a single human and the princess he had chosen to believe in. The council speaker announced that the Mathari homeworld would be placed under protected status and that a full investigation of the hegemony's crimes would begin. Immediately, as they left the chamber, Vela walked beside Jiwan with her head held high for the first time in decades. The council will want to know if Earth intends to continue our partnership, she said quietly. Jiwan stopped and turned to face. That depends, he replied. What do you want, Vela? She looked into his eyes, and she knew that her answer would change everything. I want to stay with you, she whispered, if you will have me. His smile was brighter than any star she had ever seen. The alien princess blinked in surprise. You're choosing me as your partner, human? 1 year had changed everything. Vela stood on the balcony of the restored royal palace and watched human ships descend through the atmosphere of her homeworld. Their hulls painted with the symbols of aid organizations and relief missions. The scars on the land were still visible, the wounds left by decades of hegemony exploitation. But everywhere she looked, she could see signs of healing and hope. New buildings rose from the ruins of old cities, powered by technology that humans had shared freely without asking for payment. Gardens bloomed in places that had been barren for years, planted by Mathari and human volunteers working side by side. And most precious of all, children played in the streets again, their scales flashing with bright colors as they laughed and chased each other through the recovering world. It is beautiful, is it not? Vela turned to find her advisor, an elderly Mathari named Solon, standing beside her with tears glistening in his ancient eyes. I never thought I would see our world like this again, he continued. I had given up hope long ago, but you brought these humans to us, princes, and they have given us back our future. Vela shook her head gently. I did not bring them. Old friend, I simply chose to trust one human, and he showed me that trust was not wasted. Solon bowed and left her alone with her thoughts. and Vela turned back to watch the ships continue their work. Today was the final day of the cultural exchange program. In a few hours, she would stand before representatives from across the galaxy and formally conclude her partnership with G1. The contract would end, and according to galactic law, they would no longer have any obligation to each other. But the thought of that ending made her heart ache in ways she had not expected. She had prepared a speech thanking humanity for everything they had done, releasing G1 from any further duty, giving him the freedom to return to his normal diplomatic work. It was the right thing to do, she told herself, even if it felt wrong in every way that mattered. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the palace, rebuilt with human help to be even more beautiful than before. Delegates from a dozen worlds had come to witness the conclusion of the partnership that had changed galactic politics. Forever Vela stood at the center of the hall, wearing formal robes that had belonged to her grandmother, her scales controlled to show only calm dignity. Despite the storm of emotions raging inside her, G1 stood across from her, dressed in the formal uniform of an Earth ambassador, his expression unreadable. We gathered today to mark the end of the cultural exchange partnership between Earth and the Mathari sovereignty, announced the council observer, a neutral party assigned to witness the ceremony. Princess Vela, you may speak. Vela took a deep breath and began the speech she had prepared. 1 year ago, I sat alone in a great hall, waiting to be ignored as I had been ignored for decades. I had accepted my fate as the last princess of a dying people, and I expected nothing from the galaxy that had abandoned us. She paused, looking at G1 with gratitude shining in her eyes. But then a human came to me and asked a question that changed everything. He asked if I would be his partner, and I could not understand why anyone would choose someone as worthless as I believed myself to be. The hall was silent, every being present hanging on her words. This year has taught me that I was wrong about many things. I was wrong about my people, who have proven that we can rise again when given the chance. I was wrong about the galaxy, where we have found friends we never expected. And I was wrong about myself, because I am not worthless at all. She turned to face G1 directly. Ambassador Khan G1, on behalf of the Mathari sovereignty, I thank you for everything you have done. The contract between us is fulfilled, and you are released from all obligations with our deepest gratitude. And no, G1 said suddenly. Vela stopped, confused by the interruption. G1 stepped forward, and his formal expression softened into the warm smile that she had come to treasure over the past year. You do not get to release me, Vela, not like this. He turned to address the watching delegates. Honored guests, I apologize for interrupting, but there is something the princess does not seem to understand about humans. He looked back at Vela, and his eyes held depths of emotion that made her scales flash with involuntary light. Humans do not end bonds simply because a contract expires. The relationships we build are not transactions to be concluded when the paperwork is complete. When we choose to stand beside someone, we mean it forever. Vela felt her heart racing as G1 walked toward her. I did not choose you because I saw a political advantage, and I do not want to leave now that our official partnership is over. I chose you because I saw who you truly are beneath all the sadness and fear, and I want to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life. He stopped in front of her and held out his hand, just as he had done 1 year ago in a different great hall. Princess Vela Soanthi, I am not asking you to be my diplomatic partner anymore. I am asking if you will choose to be my true ally, my trusted friend, my family in every way that matters, not because any contract requires it, but because you want to. Tears streamed down Vela's face, and her scales blazed with colors she could not control and did not want to. Yes, she whispered, and then louder. Yes, I choose you, G1, I choose you. She placed her hand in his, and the gathered delegates watched in amazement as the princess of a dying world and the ambassador of a death world made a promise that no political force could break in the years that followed. The bond between humanity and the Mythari became the foundation of a new kind of alliance. Other forgotten species, other abandoned peoples, came to humanity seeking the same compassion that had saved the Mythari, and humans welcomed them all because they understood something that the old powers of the galaxy had forgotten. True strength was not measured in ships or weapons or wealth. True strength was measured in the courage to choose someone who had nothing to offer except themselves. And in the end, that courage changed the stars forever. The alien princess had once asked why a human would choose her. Now she understood the answer. Humans do not see what you are. They see who you could become, and they never stop believing in you until you believe in yourself.